It's like we got 20 minutes, so it's sport analytics at glance, a bit of history, a bit of what's happening with the field now, and maybe if we got some time for the frontiers of sport analytics in the era of big data. So actually, this whole domain is not something new. If we going back to the 19th century, then the middle of 19th century, a guy called Henry Chadwick, a baseball pioneer, invented the box score to systematically record what's happening on the baseball pitch. Okay, he was looking at the situation from a reporter perspective. He wants to come up with a system that will enable the newspapers around the United States to report on what happened, what was the performances by players, what the team have achieved. And he realized that in order for the game to be more popular, this need to be done in systematic and unified manner. Okay, so it is maybe the first attempt in modern sport to come up with a system to accurately, systematically record sport performance on notes. And because of it, this discipline called notational analysis, because we using notes to record what's happening on the pitch. Later on, we can see a lot of examples in different journals in Europe, in United States, of attempts to record what happened. Here we see an example of mistakes in a tennis game from 1890, okay? And the guy that making those notes, he's recording returns that were off the court, returns that went into the net. Of course, that later on, we can look how the game proceed and identify where the mistakes origin from. Another example, probably more example that guys here and of course trainers that worked with team played, we know it, we're more familiar with it. When we take a football pitch, we divide it for different areas, and then we are able, the table in the upper section, you see, we can go with the numbers of the players, indicate the zone where the player started his action, the zone where the action ended. Here we can specify the type of action, and if the possession was remained or it was lost, the action was successful or less successful. And if someone is doing it through the match, then we can eventually end up with a small data, and the data is objective. We can, when we analyze it after the game, we actually can reconstruct what happened, where we were more successful, where the mistakes came from. So it give us some objective reality of about the match. One of the pioneers in this area of the early attempts to record data and to come up with conclusions in the game of football is a counter. He was not a professional athlete. He was a bookkeeper. He's came into sport with financial background, and what he did, Charles Rip, he was for years, for decades, in the 50s, in the 60s, he was watching football games of the what today named English Premier League, and he was documenting the number of passes in each ball possession, and he documented the outcome of each ball possession. So eventually, after 10 years, after hundreds of matches that he was documenting, he was able to draw some conclusions about what is the average ball possession of how many passes happening in the average ball possession, and which ball possessions are associated with goals. And eventually, he is the father of this long ball tactic that became very prevalent in the English football, because he identified that most of the goals, one of his conclusions was that only 2 out of 9 goals come from attacks with 3 passes and more. After it, those findings were criticized, and there were a lot of variables that he was unable to account for. But his paper, this table here is from his paper in Statistical Journal in 1967, is the first scientific paper based on analysis of sport data. So another important pioneer in this domain is, of course, Valery Lobanovsky, and the guy, the statistician and the physician that assisted him, a scientist named Zelentsov. He also looked at sport from statistic perspective, from complex theory perspective, like 2 systems that's trying to create perturbation in the symmetry of the other system, and in order to this perturbation eventually develop and create some opportunity on the opposition goal. So those guys are really like pioneers of sport analytics in football. They were collecting a lot of data and tried to draw some conclusions from this data to identify what type of tactic or what amount of physical load on the players, if we're talking about Lobanovsky, is optimizing the performance. So if we try to conceptualize what is happening with all these early attempts to collect data, and then to analyze this data, we can relate those attempts in sport analytics to the general objective of science. And of science, we got 4 levels. The first level in science is just objectively collect data about the environment to describe the phenomenon, to describe the environment in consistent, in an objective manner. So this is the first level, when we just collect the data. Then we want to proceed to the second level. The second level, we want to look at the data and to identify what patterns, what variables are associated with success, are promoting our performance. After we're able to identify those variables, like if we accurately passing, or if we successfully dribbling, or if we got better physical shape, we can identify that our team plays better. So after those variables being identified, there's these correlations, then we're able to predict what is going to happen. We're able to say which player are going to succeed in the NBA or in the higher level, and which player probably don't have the necessary features to succeed on the professional level. And the final step is the control. And now we will see how sport analytics being activated, being explored on each of these 4 steps that correlate with objective of science. Okay, so the problem until now, like in the 70s, in the 80s, in the beginning of the 90s, that all this data was stored by this enthusiast. Okay, he was sitting on the court, he was collecting data, but the data in many cases was not systematically stored. And when the guy moved to the next team with his notebook, the data was lost. So we could not aggregate a lot of data and to analyze the data on the league level, on a 10 years level, on 20 years level. So the conclusions that we could draw from this kind of small data of one guy that documenting tens of games, the conclusions that we can draw were very limited. So the next step in sport analytics is the introduction of the computer. And here we got two famous pioneers. One is Bill James, the other one is Billy Beane. Two of them are mentioned in this famous book and movie, The Moneyball. Okay, Bill James, during the 70s, realized that in order for the sport analytic, for this all domain become effective, he need to aggregate data from thousands of games. And eventually they came up with this idea to create a system inside the computer in the beginning of this era of computerization. During the late 80s, they start to systematically upload game after game after game, and also doing it retrospectively from games from 70s and from 60s. And by the beginning of the 90s, they were able to compile a data set of thousands of games that were able, now ready for analysis. And they identified a lot of meaningful patterns. A lot of that in the movie Moneyball, we can see the fruit of this a very how we say hard and a long effort. We see the fruit with this team, where Brad Pitt plays this guy Billy Beane, the CEO of Oakland Athletics, and we see the result of this effort by this team of guys, of enthusiasts that were able to aggregate a lot of data about a lot of baseball games. If we're going back to Europe, or going back to the sports that we're more familiar with and looking at basketball and then NBA, then during the beginning of the 90s, the IBM, who became a sponsor of the NBA League, provided each team with a computer and with unique guy that was responsible for coding the each play, each second, each action on the court. So in the middle of the 90s, there were already a huge data sets of basketball data. And we see here an article from 1996 about data mining, how to work with this data that was already aggregated and how to draw meaningful conclusions from this data. So IBM eventually developed a unique program that they name it Advanced Scout, that this Advanced Scout program was available to every team, and every team was using this program to identify meaningful patterns, like what kind of play leads to success, what kind of defense more effective for us, what are the weak points of the opposition. In football, in 1996, similar tracking system, like system that is coding what are the position of the players, and guy, an operator of the system, this working in parallel with the automatic recognition system, writing, coding if it was a tackle, if it was a pass, if it was an interception. And after the game, we end up with huge data set where during every second of the match, we see the location of every player and the action of the players, and if they were successful or not successful. The most advanced system for recording performance, and it's really something that is up to date. It's right now being used. It's SportView system that was introduced for all the arenas in the NBA, and it's related to Israeli missile track system, because the guys that came up with, they were previously in the military, so they were really familiar with technology of how to identify a moving object and how to record the movement of this object into the data set, and how later on to analyze this data about movement and to draw conclusions about the movement. So Now we got a lot of data. We got a lot of systems that recording a lot of information, and they do so in unified manner. It's identical across many leagues, across different kind of matches. So right now, let's see how we use this data to better understand what's going on and what is associated with success and with excellent performance. So this, if we going back to our pyramid of science in the left corner of the screen, this is the describe level. We can simply visualize. We got a lot of data, and we now able to visualize what happens on the floor in the NBA. We got here 4 seasons of data, and we can see the success rates from different areas based on millions of basketball shots. And you can see there is here a nice anomaly. You can see where the writing, the shot attempts from this area are exceptionally low. So we are able to identify an anomaly, and here we are, but here we only describe what we see. Okay, the next level, okay, it is another example of describe what we see. We got here Steph Curry, and we got, when we are able to compare 2 seasons. The graph from the left, you can see his first season, and then from the right, we can see how he proceeded, how he became more effective 2 seasons later. We can see that on the graph from the left, here is less effective under the basket, and here becomes more effective. We can see that he able to increase his performance here from the outside from 41 to 42%, and so the data, the huge amounts of data that we are storing simply enable us to describe the trends in our performance. Okay, the second level is identification of indicators. Okay, we got a lot of research, this stream of research that simply tries to take this data, to run correlations, to run regression models, to write decision trees, to write random forest analysis. The technique is less relevant. It can be very advanced, very simple. But the idea is to understand what kind of independent variable they enable to explain that what's happening with the variable that it want to predict, to control, the dependent variable. So we got this research in basketball, in football, in baseball, in handball, and it's based on correlations between independent and dependent variables. Okay, the next level is the prediction. Okay, we're looking on data sets of thousands of players that already played in the NBA, already played in the English Professional League, and we look at their performance at the age of 80. At the age of 18, at the age of 17, at the national team, and we try to identify what kind of performance in age of 16, 17, 15 is characterizing successful NBA or professional football player. So after we learning those huge data sets of performance on the player level, we're able to look at player that now at age of 15 and to clearly state if his performance at age of 15 resembles the patterns that were identified of professional players that right now they're 25, they are 30, but we learned from their performance when they 10 years ago. Okay, so this is the prediction step of sport analysis. And the final level, the control level, it is, I just here will show a couple of examples of the control level. Right now, this is the paper that identifies that injuries are a huge economic burden on football teams. But looking at the data, when we monitor physical loads of the player, the amount of practice, the age of the players, the position when they played, the journeys they made between away and home games, we realize that the players' injuries in basketball, in football, in every sport, they are not random. Even traumatic injuries that seem to be like they are random, we can identify the exact physical loads that increase or decrease the probability of those even traumatic injuries. And naturally for the overload injuries, the correlations are even more prominent. So after we able to identify what exact combination of physical loads associated with increased probability of player's injury, we got right now systems that flag this dangerous situation, and all professionals clubs work with scientific departments that monitor the physical loads, and they raise the flag. You see this pattern of load that the player, what he did in the game, what he did in the practices, it was already identified with high probability for an injury. So here the sports scientists will intervene and somehow change the practice. Somehow will switch one kind of physical load to another that is less, that decreases the probability for injury. So this is the control level of data science, when we use the correlations to intervene and to influence what's happening on the pitch in the club. And another example, this is the final one, is more tactical example. Looking on data sets of hundreds and thousands of passes from matches, we're able to identify, like here we got two teams. And the size of the circle represent how the player is central, how player is how much of the ball movement is going through this player. So we see that in the team from the right, there is only one such big red player. This means that the team from the right, the movement of the ball is more centralized. We can see that in team from the left, the bigger circles indicate that the player moving more, and they are more proximate to each other. So when we prepare our team, if this team playing against this team, the team doing this kind of analysis and identifies that this player, the one sole player, this is really pivotal for all the game movement of the opposing team, they design a specific pressure to break this kind of pattern, to pressure this player and to hinder the ball movement of the opposing team. Naturally, if we see this kind of ball movement, we got three important players. So it's much more harder for the opposing team to influence and to hinder this ball movement, because it's more homogeneous and less centralized. Okay, so this is I think like this is my 20 minutes gone, and I say yes, thank you everybody. Okay, I try to really squeeze a lot of material in this 20 minutes. And of course, you know, if you got, I'm not a technical guy. I'm not a computer guy. You need guys with strong statistical computer background to run this kind of research. But I'm good with the framing of those studies, with creating the concept, with maybe asking the right questions. So if you got questions, then you are welcome to send an email, and I will try to do my best to assist. If you got a computer department in your university, and I know you got a sport department, then maybe a collaboration between those two can foster this kind of endeavor. So thank you very much.